level 4 mobilization. Location, Fisk Tower.
Fisk? The 2018 Spider-Man reboot arrived relatively late in the PlayStation 4's lifecycle. The PlayStation 4 Pro was already a mature product, and the rumor mill was abuzz about the 9th generation consoles that were set to launch in a couple of years. First-party developer Insomniac Games leveraged their experience working with Sony hardware. These are the people who delivered the Resistance and Ratchet & Clank series, so at this point they are a technical force to be reckoned with. From the effortless gameplay and rock-solid performance to the remarkably detailed environments and characters, Spider-Man 2018 was a compelling reason to get a PlayStation console. This year we're getting not one but two Spider-Man games on the PlayStation 5, Spider-Man Remastered and Spider-Man Miles Morales. As one of the more technically accomplished games in the 8th gen, it's somewhat surprising that Spider-Man's getting the remaster treatment, and that too so early. Nevertheless, here we have it. Running on the same engine and largely utilizing the same assets, it's fascinating to compare these titles to each other and to Spider-Man on the PS4 Pro and the PS5. What exactly do the remaster and Miles Morales bring to the table? We're looking at hardware ray tracing, a higher resolution output, and improved models and shaders. This isn't a case of upping the resolution and calling it a day. There are profound improvements to be seen in both games. How exactly do they stack up to the older PS4 Pro code? Let's take a look. Engine overview. Unlike the Demon's Souls remake on PlayStation 5, the PlayStation 5 version of Spider-Man Remastered isn't a top-to-bottom technical remake. Rather, Insomniac builds on a solid foundation of 8th gen code to add meaningful improvements where they matter. Spider-Man runs on the same in-house engine as 2016's Ratchet & Clank. On the other front, Miles Morales moves the technical dial far beyond what we're seeing in Spider-Man Remastered, but in subtle ways. The winter setting and some tweaked material rendering mean that the visuals feel different. Insomniac's impressive material and lighting work there resulted in a CGI-like experience at times. Both Spider-Man games are very different, both in terms of aesthetics and scope. Relatively linear areas and dense detail are swapped out for a wide-open city built around smooth, web-swinging traversal. Compared to Ratchet & Clank, there are compromises in terms of LODs and minor object detail. However, that best-of-breed, physically-based material renderer is very much intact, and high-quality character and object models make their appearance in cutscenes. Lighting is excellent too. Insomniac made use of static global illumination. The pre-calculated indirect lighting is often stunningly lifelike. In Miles Morales, the GI really ramps the visual experience up during nighttime scenes on snowy streets, with indirect lighting bouncing off sources like neon lights and onto the snow. And the loading times on both the PS5's versions are amazing. Let's take a look at that. Image quality and performance. While the PlayStation 4 Pro was advertised as a 4K console, it didn't quite have the graphics horsepower to offer a native 4K experience. Spider-Man on the PlayStation 4 Pro utilizes dynamic resolution scaling. Thanks to the excellent temporal anti-aliasing and the game's filmic post-processing, dips in resolution aren't very noticeable. However, stacked up against the native 4K output on the PlayStation 5, the PlayStation 4 Pro image is noticeably softer, especially as the action heats up and the resolution drops to stabilize performance. Insomniac made use of the PlayStation 5's considerable GPU capabilities to deliver a full 4K output in both Miles Morales and the remaster with quality and performance modes. Dynamic resolution scaling doesn't appear to be in use here, meaning gamers get a crisp native 4K image at all times. Performance on the PlayStation 4 Pro was relatively good, all things considered. Both Spider-Man games delivered a very consistent 30 FPS experience, with great frame pacing and only a handful of dips below. The PlayStation 5's quality mode does what it's supposed to do. You're still getting a rock-solid 30 FPS. It's in performance mode, with ray tracing turned off, that frame rates shoot right up. In performance mode, these games hit and mostly maintain a 4K 60 FPS lock. The native 4K presentation and the remarkably smooth gameplay experience could make this the mode of choice, even if that means losing out on those ray-traced reflections. Ultimately, the PlayStation 5's raw horsepower gives players more flexibility in terms of performance, while offering superior image quality across the board. Ray tracing. This is the big headline differentiator between Spider-Man and Miles Morales on PlayStation 4 Pro and the PlayStation 5 Remaster. Insomniac leveraged RDNA 2's hardware retracing support to add in ray-traced reflections and ray-traced indirect shadowing. Insomniac's console ray-tracing implementation is fascinating, considering how things look relative to hardware ray-tracing in the PC space and the kind of compromises made to get there. For starters, there is a major performance hit. Ray tracing is only supported in the quality mode in both games, which drops the frame rate to 30 FPS, a straight match for the PlayStation 4 Pro code. High quality motion blur and a remarkably smooth animation system make 4K 30 FPS gameplay viable, but this is a noticeably choppier experience compared to the 60 FPS performance mode. Early trailers of the Spider-Man remaster were also criticized for the quality of the ray-traced effects. Ray-traced reflections appear to render in at a sub-native resolution. Also, aggressive culling means that not all objects receive ray-traced reflections. Regardless, ray-traced reflections are a massive step up from the screen space implementation on PlayStation 4 Pro. The reflections resolve a much higher level of detail than their screen space counterparts, and the effect is often day and night when you're perched next to a glass window. Ray-traced indirect shadowing is a bit harder to notice. This is largely because Spider-Man on PS4 Pro already featured competent ambient occlusion, and the static global illumination did a great job of accurately modeling lower light areas. However, the ray-traced shadowing adds a level of detail to darker areas, especially at ground level. The effect is more noticeable in cutscenes, especially with character and object close-ups. Character models and shading. Sony highlighted improved character models and shading as key improvements to the Spider-Man remaster. This came as a bit of a surprise since the original PlayStation 4 code already featured excellent, high-polygon characters with great skin shading. Insomniac has apparently decided to take things up a notch or two though. While it can be tough to discern the difference during gameplay, the higher fidelity models really shine through during cutscenes and close-ups. We're looking at higher polygon counts for key character models and an overhauled skin shader. This is one of the areas where Miles Morales shows tangible improvements over the remaster. While Spider-Man Remastered also features improved character models, the sheer polygon count and higher frequency detail on Miles' character model trumps the original. Miles Morales and the remaster are supposed to feature higher quality hair rendering too. However, we weren't able to spot the differences here, and the post-processed AA didn't help. These are relatively iterative improvements. However, the differences are apparent when you stack up the PlayStation 4 Pro code up next to the PlayStation 5 games. Objects and people just look that bit better. Conclusion: a solid remaster and a great demonstration of console ray tracing. Neither Miles Morales nor Spider-Man Remastered goes to extraordinary technical lengths on the PlayStation 5, and maybe that's because it doesn't really have to, or perhaps both being cross-generation games hold them back from truly shining. Spider-Man on PS4 Pro looked and played incredibly well for a late 8th generation title. The PlayStation 5 outings for both games mostly build in subtle ways, from smoother looking character models to enhanced performance. The real difference though comes from turning on hardware ray tracing. While a drop to 30 FPS might be tough to deal with for some, ray-traced reflections and shadowing are a night and day difference. They're also a great early demonstrator of console ray tracing, proving that AMD's RDNA 2 hardware is at least as capable as NVIDIA's last-gen Turing cards. And that wraps it up. If you like what we are doing, please consider subscribing to our channel, and don't forget to switch on the bell notification icon. That way you will never miss out on any of our videos.